Hello dear chess friends, I'm International Master Andrey Ostrovskiy and you're welcome to the final lesson of the series about King and Pawn Endgames dedicated to some complex cases. So the first example, and we can notice that it is a situation of the mutual Zugzwang. So as we can see, both kings can't really move because once the king moves, he loses the connection with the own pawn and this pawn drops. So kings should stay on f3 and e5 squares, and everything that both sides have here is a variety of waiting pawn moves. So it is a complex situation because, well, there are a lot of different opportunities to calculate. So usually it is quite hard to organize the thinking process properly. So the question is how to start, right? So there is the interesting rule that can help in such a situation. So we can see that we have only three pawns that can actually move. They are h3 pawn, b2 pawn, and a2. So how to understand which pawn should move, or at least how to start your calculation properly. So if we compare pawn b2, a2, and pawn h3, we can notice that pawn h3 is already on the third rank. So this pawn can behave the only way, doesn't really matter what happens on the board, so it can move only one short move at a time. Pawns b2 and a2 still have possibility to make a long move if necessary. So you don't really know right away which move will be needed. I mean, the long move like b4 or the short move like b3. So it's better for you just to keep those pawns on b2 and a2 squares, so to keep those pawns in initial positions, and this way to save the possibility of making a long move if necessary. So it's better to start with the pawn which will behave the same way in any case, and it is definitely the h3 pawn. So h4 is the best move here. And true, if we see what happens after other moves, we easily understand that white loses. For example, if white starts with the b4 move, then after correct h6 reaction, h4, h5, well, white is in Zugzwang, inevitably. Let's say if a3, then b5. White has to move, no pawn moves anymore, and white just loses material, right? If a4, then b6. And doesn't really matter with which pawn white moves, so black just avoids the exchange, and again, white is in Zugzwang. If white starts on the queen side with the b3 move, so with the short move, black also wins after a5. Now, if let's say a3, then b5, h4, h5, and again, white is in Zugzwang after b4, a4. So you can easily check that white loses in all the variations. So only h4 helps white to win this Zugzwang battle. So what to do with black here? If black plays h5 here, then white wins with the help of the long move. So b4 decides. Let's say if black reacts with the b5, then a3. Black to move, white wins. If black plays b6 here, then a4. And again, doesn't really matter with which pawn black plays here. White just avoids the exchange, and it is a Zugzwang. So pawn race doesn't help, because white is much, much faster. It's clear. So after h4, black reacts the same way. So black uses the pawn that will behave the same way in any case. So it is the pawn which is already on the 6th rank. It is the a pawn, and black plays a5. White continues playing with that pawn, h5. So now if, let's say, h6, then white wins with the help of blockading pawn a5. So a4, b6, b3. So black to move, black loses. So after h5, black plays a4. And white has a chance to continue with this pawn, so just h6, blockading h7 pawn, and actually black loses the game because white simply has more weight in moves. For example, if black plays b5 here, then a3, that's it, game over. If black plays a3, then after b takes a3, at first glance it looks like that black wins the fight after b5, blockading pawn a3. But again, white can sacrifice this pawn, just a4, b takes a4, and a3, again with the Zugzwang for black. So after h6, black tries b6, and now this possibility to make a long move at the same time with the short move decides. So here white needs exactly the long move, so white plays b4. And we can see that after b5, white has additional a3 move. That's it, white wins. And if black takes on b3, it doesn't change the situation, so a b3, b5, b4, forcing the king to move. So let's say if king goes to f6, grabbing h6, then white has a good maneuver. King takes f4, king g6, and very important to play king e5 here, because if our pawn starts moving right now, the king is just very close to it, so the king has the time to grab h6 pawn and to go to f8 at the same time, just blockading the pawn. So first, we have to improve the position of our king. King e5, king h6, and king f6, blockading the king, creating this barrier, g5, g6, and g7 controlled, so the promotion of the e-pawn is ensured, and white wins, of course. So after b4, let's try king e6, but this doesn't change the situation. After king f4, king f6, e5, king g6. Well, at first glance, looks like black managed to trick white, because now white doesn't have this maneuver king e5, king f6, but okay, white has the time, because white's pawn is much better, so it is advanced, it is already on the 5th rank, while black's potential counterpart h7 pawn is still in the initial position. So king e4, king h6, king d5, king g7, king d6, ensuring the promotion of the pawn, and white is faster. h5, e6, h4, e7, and if king f7 and king d7, pawn promotes faster. So golden rule, which is called the rule of the Steinitz, to save the possibilities of making short and long moves. So in this position, you have to start with the pawn that already has no choices, right? So the pawn h3 will behave the same way in any case. That's why it is not a bad idea, but a brilliant idea just to start with this pawn, because you never know which move you need, a long move or a short move on the queen side, so it depends. That's why it's better to start with the pawn that will be moving the same way in any case, and it is the h4 move which in this particular case helps white to win the game. So let's have a look on the other example. In this position, white has a passed pawn. It is a c4 pawn, which could be a deflection of black's attention. So it is a typical factor that favors white, right? But the pawn structure looks better for black, because black has no weaknesses, and white's e4 pawn looks vulnerable, and it is accessible for black's king in many cases, right? So everything says that black has a sufficient counterplay here, and in some cases maybe even can play for a win. So black simply made the most natural move here. It is king to c5, which makes a position of the king much better, which creates a threat of king d4, just attacking white's pawn, and so on. So in 90% of cases in a similar situation, the move like king c3 will be simply forced. But in this position, it is not. So actually, king c5 is a decisive mistake. So after king c5, black has no chances to save the game. But white, of course, has to come up with a great decision, and it is g4. So g4, the move that simply makes pawn structure much better for white now. So it easily makes all black's pawns on the king side useless. So black now has no counterplay. So black can't really achieve anything on the king side. So black can't really create a passed pawn there, which leaves black without counterplay. For example, if g6, only then king goes to c3, and now f5 is no longer possible, so f5 leads to sacrificing the pawn, which makes no sense because there is no breakthrough. White's king is very close to this kingside pawns, so no counterplay connected with that. If black plays h5, trying to do something with the g4 pawn, then it's possible just to take and to play h4, blockading pawn h5 and simply forcing black's king to move, after which white starts maneuvering his own king and gradually makes a progress. So here again, black has no useful move. Black can't wait with the pawn move, so the only pawn move that is possible here, it is f5, but it sacrifices a pawn for nothing. So pawn e4 simply takes that pawn. This pawn becomes just additional deflection for black's king, so it becomes a great help in addition to c5. Right, and white's king is able to stop e5 pawn. So everything says that king c6 should move, after which white wins the fight for d5 square, and it is already simply understood layout. So king is very active, pawn c5 is a deflection for black's king, and while black's king fights with this pawn, this king d5 gets to e6, grabs pawn f6, grabs e5, and then soon after white simply wins. So h5 doesn't help, so what to do? To play king d6 maybe, then king b4, king c6, c5, and the same. So after h5 takes, king c4, h4, and now h3. So actually a similar pattern, stopping black's pawns, waiting for black's f5 move probably. If not, then king goes to d5 and white wins. That is the result of black's inaccurate king c5 move, so a careless decision. And after g4, now, well, appears that black no longer has a counterplay connected with the movement of the kingside pawns. But what about king d4? So it looks like black should be as fast as white, at very least, in a promotion race. So in fact, white wins a promotion race after that. King goes to b4, king takes e4, c5. Now black has a choice between king f3 and king d5. So if king goes to f3, nothing stops the pawn c5, and it just promotes first. And after e2, it is not a problem to win the game after, let's say, queen c1. Just stopping the pawn, creating a threat of blockading it, and the rest is simple. So if king f2, then, well, several checks, king comes closer, and so on. So it's an easily winning position for white. So after c5, to stop the movement of the pawn, it is necessary to make this king d5 move. At least this stops this pawn from moving right now, so it forces white to make this additional king move. After which pawns promote simultaneously, but we can see that king on d5 occupies very bad position, so it is far away from own queen and it can't be forced to the same file with the queen. So after queen d8, king d4, white has a winning skewer. It is queen to e7 check. Next move will be queen takes queen, white wins. So king c5, despite looking so natural, appears a decisive mistake. So how to improve black's position? So black has to think of the pawn structure. What is really important, black has to predict how this pawn structure can be changed, right? And who benefits from these changes. So we can see that g4 is a great threat, right? So after g4, black simply has no counterplay. So the correct decision here is, of course, h5. With the help of this move, black manages to grab the space on the king side, what is really important to prevent white's g4, which makes black's plan connected with the g6 and f5 simply ensured, so nothing can stop black from making this g6 f5 moves, after which black manages to create a passed pawn on the king side and come up with the sufficient counterplay, and in some cases even white has to save the game with only moves. Let's say king b4, king goes to c6, c5, now g6, king goes to c4 and f5. And now we can notice the great difference if compared to the lines that we saw after white played g4. So now black's pawns are really powerful. So e takes f5, g takes f5. And now white has only two sensible moves. They are g3 and h4. For example, if white plays h4, then black plays f4. Still controlling d4 square, so preventing white from activating the king, improving its position, and probably even attacking black's pawns on the king side. So king b4 is forced because white doesn't want to lose c5 pawn. Now black plays e4, king goes to c4, e3, creating this relative promotion, so the only move for white is king to d3, king takes on c5, and at first glance it looks like black even wins this position, but in fact white has g3, just undermining f4 pawn. By the way, very common and underestimated method of fighting for a draw, and well, beginner players and some club players just don't know about this method. So g3, undermining the pawn, and after f takes g3, king takes e3, inevitably getting closer to g3 pawn, after which, well, it will be a draw even if white loses the h pawn. So h4 doesn't work, g3, well, also not enough for something serious, so black has several methods. So the first one is just to simplify everything immediately. f4 takes king d4, f3, king takes c5, and it is a dead draw. After the king gets to g7. Another method is just to play e4, and in case of king d4, let's say king b5, because now the promotion race is simply okay. King d5, e3, e2, e1, so black was first, so now black can try several checks even to see if there are some chances in this queen's endgame, but in fact there are no chances, so it should be just a draw, right? So h5, a great move, just fighting for flexibility of the pawn structure. So pawn structure matters in king and pawn endgames, and well, the one has to predict the changes in the pawn structure in endgames like this. I mean, complicated endgames with a lot of pawns present on the board, and the one has to understand who benefits from these changes, so which side can benefit from the changes of the pawn structure. So h5 was the only move here to prevent white's extremely good g4 move. So g4, which is a brilliant decision to freeze black's pawn on the king side, right? I mean the pawn f6 mainly because, well, only this pawn was dangerous enough, right? So black's only active plan is to play g6 f5 to create a passed pawn there, and g4 completely stops that. So that h5 was the only move here to prevent g4. So why black made this mistake? So probably black perfectly understood that h5 is needed here. I do believe that black understood this, right? So the only thing is king c5. It is just a careless decision because, well, it looks like that white is forced to play king c3 because at first glance it looks like king d4 is a serious threat, and, well, after this the pawn race will be okay for black. In fact, it is not. So in my opinion, the main reason of this mistake was a incorrect calculation of the line connect with the king d4, or maybe underestimation of the power of the c4 pawn if it starts moving within the promotion race, right? So we can see that, well, positional understanding, correct evaluation of the position, understanding the pawn structure, and correct calculation, accurate calculation, all these things are very important to play king and pawn endgames efficiently, to make efficient decision, to have a success in this part of the game. And I do believe that this series was a great contribution to your knowledge and understanding of this type of endgames. Thanks a lot for your attention. See you next lessons.